Bankless Nation, welcome to the Devcon 6 experience. I just got back from Devcon Bogota, and it was my first Devcon, and I had a ton of fun. And this is something I do every time I go to a conference, some big conference. I try and come back with as much content and interviews as possible. So this trip, I come back with about 10 interviews between 10 to 20 minutes in length from a variety of members throughout the Ethereum community to get their perspective as to what Devcon was for them, what they're paying attention to in the future, and overall, just how much fun do they have while hanging out in Bogota, Colombia. First up in the list, Vitalik Buterin, of course. And we talk about a number of different things throughout Devcon. He's been to every single Devcon, so I asked him about the history of Devcon and how Devcon has progressed forward as Ethereum has progressed forward. And I also make the point about how Devcon isn't really just a tech conference. It's also something much more than that. So what does Devcon actually do for the Ethereum ecosystem? And then we just go through the list of a variety of other subjects as well, such as what are developers focusing on now that we are post-merge? And also, what does he think about the Arbitrum acquisition of Prysmatic Labs? And overall, what's he going to do in Colombia once Devcon is over? And what does Vitalik Buterin do when the sun goes down and everyone goes to parties? What does he do? Does he go to parties? So stay tuned for all of those questions and more. But first, we're going to talk about every single sponsor that makes this show possible in a fun and creative speedrun. So here we go. TRUEFI is leading DeFi into the future of on-chain, uncollateralized loans, opening up DeFi to the $8 trillion global credit market. Whether you want higher yields on your lending, or you're a fund manager who just wants access to global liquidity and the cost savings of DeFi, TRUEFI is here for you. But if you're going to use TRUEFI, use it through the Brave browser, the user-first browser for the Web3 age. The Brave browser keeps your digital footprint small, keeping you in the driver's seat while also being a powerful battle station for Web3, letting you access your crypto through its native wallet, view your NFTs, and keep up to date with your Web3 communities. Another thing you can use through Brave is, of course, Arbitrum. And you all, of course, have heard about Arbitrum, but the Arbitrum ecosystem is really heating up. With the recent launch of Arbitrum Nova, Arbitrum has entered the world of multi-chain layer 2s. And with the recent acquisition of Prysmatic Labs, Arbitrum firepower is bigger than ever. Arbitrum Nitro shipped last month and has made Arbitrum faster and cheaper than ever before. So make sure that you can experience what Arbitrum has to offer before it's too late. But maybe you're a developer who hates the constraints of the EVM. So check out the Fuel VM from the Fuel network, which has opened up the world of parallel transaction execution, breaking Fuel network free from EVM baggage. With Fuel, you can leverage the Rust tooling ecosystem to build stronger apps, all while keeping Ethereum level security. Also pushing the frontier of Web3 development is the Sequence wallet from Horizon. Sequence is the all-in-one developer platform you need to build Web3 games and applications. For users, Sequence is a smart wallet, and perhaps the most intuitive wallet in all of Web3. But for developers, it's a plug-and-play platform for all Web3 apps and games. Check out Sequence, which is already powering some of the best Web3 games out there. And lastly, DESO is a decentralized social platform built from the ground up to disrupt the social media industry. Disrupting social media takes a lot of data, and DESO's infinite state applications can finally store and index large amounts of content and data fully on-chain. With multiple crypto-native monetization mechanisms for both developers and creators, DESO wants to usher in a new relationship with our social applications. Check them out at DESO.com. And now, onto the show. Bankless Nation, we are here at Devcon 6 in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm of course here with Vitalik Buterin. Vitalik, how are you enjoying Bogota?
It's a nice city, it's a nice conference, so good.
So, developers convention, Devcon, would give the air that it is a tech conference, but I don't really think that summarizes what Devcon really is enough. What is Devcon?
Devcon is kind of it's a decentralized everything conference. Maybe that's what Dev stands for. There's just all kinds of different communities that are coming here, and sometimes they're even kind of intentionally brought together here, right? Like there's a whole bunch of different developers, layer 1, layer 2, cryptography, programming languages, everything. There's local community people from, both Latin America and plenty of other places. Saw a couple of people from Iran a couple of days ago, and, big shout out to all the brave people protesting there. There's people from, all kinds of different industries. There's, intellectuals of various kinds. We kind of brought in, Bruno Masaj and Venkatesh Rao this year. And, they've been kind of walking around and doing some presentations and kind of blabbing their thoughts on Twitter, and it's just been fun to see their outsider impressions of what's going on here. So yeah, I think in general it's just this really cool and weird event where all kinds of people get to see other people that they would not normally get a chance to see.
And that's certainly the experience that I've been having. And many other crypto conferences out there pick cities like New York, San Francisco, Chicago. But Devcon has always picked off the beaten path cities. Here we are in Bogota, Colombia. Previously it was Osaka, Japan, and also Prague in the Czech Republic. And what's the thought process behind how cities are selected in Bogota? And why are we going across the world rather than being in the United States?
I mean, we definitely do intentionally try to move the continents around every year. I think part of that is it's a very intentional strategy to kind of empower the Ethereum's global community and to try to give people from all of these different regions a chance to be able to come to at least one of the events easier and share their side of what crypto is doing for them. It's I think having a geographically decentralized community is just has to be part of having a decentralized community in our modern world. We get an opportunity to just see, kind of talk to all kinds of people that I think we would not be able to if it was just happening in the same place every time.
Certainly. And Ethereum, of course, is technology, it's software, but it's more than that, right? It's social coordination. And this brings it beyond the areas of just like fintech and coding stuff and much more deeper into the world of culture. I think that's what I've really been enjoying here in Bogota and many of the other Ethereum conferences is it's one part tech, but it's also one part experience. And I think that's what really Ethereum is emblematic of here to do in this world is, produce new technology that is really just to facilitate culture. And so I think it's really important that we go around and experience different parts of the world that you're not going to get in New York or San Francisco.
Absolutely.
And so this is my first Devcon actually, and even though I've been in the Ethereum space for about 4 or 5 years, the other Devcons have sadly escaped me. But I'm wondering if you could give us a trajectory of the development of the Devcon coordination. And my take here is that as Ethereum has become more and more coordinated and organized, so has Devcon. How are the previous Devcons, and how's this one different?
Yeah, so Devcon 0 was actually kind of the equivalent of what we do now with things like the M4 retreat in Athens, right? It was last year. It was just this private event, kind of 50 people, get all of the developers together, just kind of get all of people working on Ethereum itself in sync, and that's pretty much all that we could do because the Ethereum community was just so tiny then, right? Then Devcon 1 in London, first public one, which was exciting. This was also the time when Microsoft was doing lots of Ethereum things, and they were doing their enterprise blockchain stuff, and they sponsored Devcon, which was just mind blowing for everyone at the time that a company as big as Microsoft would grace a tiny little movement like ours, by even to the point of being willing to sponsor it and send a bunch of people to speak. And a lot of developers, a lot of applications, just a lot of different tracks. Then Devcon 2, Shanghai, definitely the kind of first, out of a lot of people's comfort zone one, and trying to make kind of better relations with the Chinese community, and that was interesting. And I feel like the Chinese community has been kind of doing more and more great things in Ethereum since then, right? We've got like Scroll and Soul Wallet and all of these things happening now. Then Cancun, we just wanted to be in North America, and Cancun is more accessible from people from down south than doing it in U.S. or Canada. And we also wanted to. We always keep in mind, trying to not host events in too often in places where the visas are too restrictive, and that's one of the challenges that the U.S. unfortunately has, right? Like there was that famous story where like Adi Shamir is like one of the literal grandfathers of cryptography got rejected for a visa for a cryptography conference. Yeah. But each time the events got bigger, there are kind of more and more tracks. There's more and more attempts to kind of be intentional about promoting all of the different parts of the Ethereum community that would kind of not naturally get promoted by themselves. Then Devcon 4 in Prague was the really big one, right? And like twice as big as anything that happened before. And that was also one that I remember, it's probably the first one where we made a really serious attempt to kind of bring in interesting thinkers from the outside, right? So Cory Doctorow was there. Glenn Weil from Radical Exchange was there. So a bunch of speakers and also speakers who had kind of interesting and not just positive but also kind of importantly cautionary things to say about crypto, which I think is important for us to engage with. Then Devcon 5 Osaka, and that's I feel like it was a continuation of things that were there before, and also interesting people, also more both developers and all kinds of other projects. And then here, this is like the first one in 3 years, right? So that by itself makes it really big. And there's I think in efforts to really take the best from the previous ones, right? So developers and really interesting and fascinating people getting into the deep end of polynomials. And polynomials are important, right? As I said, I'm a polynomial, you're a polynomial, we're all polynomials. And then people from all of Ethereum's local communities and people talking about different kinds of applications, and then people on the philosophy side, and there's just all of that. It feels like the venue was pretty successful, right? Like just as a venue, it was effective at venuing, which is something that has not always been true in the past. It's close to hotels, convenient for a lot of people to stay. Probably the biggest weakness of the venue is that, like I found myself when I get dragged off to like various, side dinners and events and so forth. Like there's one specific district of Bogota, about 7.5 kilometers to the northeast of here, where just like everybody went, right? And it just seems obvious that like if we could just teleport this place, 7.5 kilometers to the northeast, like that would have 2x improved it even more. But there's never perfection, and still in the grand scheme of things, it feels like everything has worked out. Obviously, a lot of people are came in worried about issues like safety, but so far I think there have been fewer like serious incidents of that type than I would say even the bulls expected. Hopefully, it's the event even gave a lot of people a chance to kind of see Latin America better for what it really is. I'm happy. Lots of people, good conference. Hope we can do more excellent ones like this in the future.
Yeah, certainly. And this is also an interesting time in Ethereum's history that we're having Devcon right after the merge, right after proof of stake. Because this seems to be a new chapter for Ethereum, and so it's just great timing that we can put everyone into the same spot and kind of come to consensus about what is the next era of Ethereum now that the proof of stake era is underway, but also now behind us because it's done. 2021 was kind of the year of shipping proof of stake, ultrasound money, and now those boxes are checked. So what boxes aren't checked that we are going to be going into in 2023? That's the conversation here at Devcon.
Solving scalability is number one. Right? Like fees have been low for the past 6 months, so it's a bit easier to kind of back burner the problem. But I think if Ethereum succeeds, we're going to have another bull, and we know what bulls mean for transaction fees, right? It's from the point of view of a user, some bulls can even be something to dread just because of how it makes transaction fees shoot up to $50 or $100 or whatever. And there is a kind of ticking clock on us to solve the issue, and we don't know how long the clock is going to keep ticking. And it's our responsibility to really make sure that scaling is figured out before then. So scaling, privacy is another one. The base layer censorship resistance is another one. Account abstraction is another one. And there's all kinds of complicated ways in which these problems intersect and tie in with each other too. On the positive side, zero knowledge proofs as a technology have just seen a huge amount of progress in the last 3 years, right? There was kind of this big leap that started, I feel, in September 2019 when Plonk was introduced, right? Because from the user's point of view, it's like, okay, Plonk, there's another snark protocol. It looks like it's a little bit niftier than before, but from a deep practitioner's point of view, it's like this very deep philosophical improvement in how we think about snarks, right? Because we're able to basically think about converting things that we want to prove into abstract polynomial equations, and then separately figuring out, okay, how do we prove the polynomial equations? And it turns out that both of those areas are, you can do lots of deep improvements on, and things become, conceptually much cleaner, becomes much easier to progress when you do really start thinking about those two separately, right? And, one side can think about, how do we turn problems that we care about into polynomials without thinking about the other side. And since then, we've seen amazing stuff like Lookup and, more and more interesting things lately. And then on the other side, there is the problem of okay, you have a polynomial equation and, the polynomials are big, but, how do we prove it? And that's seen a lot of progress too, and there's amazing stuff happening with Starks and all that, right? But this conference, I feel, has to some extent sort of been a victory lap for the the facts that technology exists and has practical use now, right? It's, everyone is talking about snarks, and it's increasingly a default thing that you stick into applications that you're building, and that's just totally not what the discourse was like 5 years ago.
Right.
Mm.
The thing I wanted to check with you is before getting into proof of stake, shipping proof of stake, it seemed to be the focal point of all of the developers. It was the thing we were focusing on. And now post proof of stake, we're definitely focused on proto danksharding and danksharding EIP 4844 as the big one, but it doesn't seem to be a monolith, right? It doesn't seem to be attracting everyone's attention. And so would you say that we're going from all of the core devs and Ethereum devs focusing on proof of stake to now focusing on a variety of things all at once? And so perhaps we're getting into an era of parallel development in Ethereum. How do you like that take?
I'd say that's true, though I think that also underestimates how much parallelism there was already, right? Even the merge, there's all this work on the execution clients, there is work from the consensus clients, there is work from the MEV people, right? It's actually a pretty big project, and then there were sort of de facto precursors like the EIP 1559, which is it doesn't have anything to do with proof of stake technically, but it kind of exercised a lot of the muscles of being able to make significant changes to the protocol. I think one way to think about post-proof of stake Ethereum development is to think about what the kind of long-term North Star of what Ethereum could look like from a technical perspective, right? And I have this fairly simple description that I gave on stage a couple of days ago, right? Which is so Ethereum in 2032, you have a node. Your node runs on your phone. Every 12 seconds or 32 seconds or whatever number we agree on, you download 3.6 megabytes of data. You hash it. You do a couple of elliptic curve equations to check a snark. That's it. You know the block is valid. Wait 12 seconds, get 3.6 megabytes of data, hash it, do some elliptic curve operations, verify the snark, and valid. 12 seconds later, data, hash, elliptic curve check, valid, right? So from the point of, the whole process just becomes, incredibly sleek and seamless to the point where, literally a phone could even do it, right? Because it's incredibly light on computation. The only thing that it's heavy on is data, and data just happens to be the thing that, phones are increasingly getting insanely good at and will get even better at over the next 10 years, right? So in that kind of a world, we have, extreme protocol simplicity. We have high decentralization from easy ability to run a node, easy ability for anyone to stake. hopefully, simplify the fork choice down. We have single slot finality. Everything about accounts and abstraction and all of these things just work, right? And the protocol does just get to this kind of stabilized end state that just looks really beautiful, right? So, that to me is what I see the final goal being from a protocol standpoint. And then the challenge is how do we figure out all these different 5 strands that will actually get us there?
Sure. One of the big pieces of news that happened at this Devcon was the acquisition of Prismatic Labs by Arbitrum. And there's 2 takes here. There's one where, yes, we've solved funding of client teams. We figured it out where we can have a relationship between a layer 2 perpetually fund the development of layer 1 clients. And so that's always been a problem that's plagued Ethereum throughout its history, is how do we fund our client teams? How do we fund our open source public goods developers? The other half of that equation is there's now this commercial entity that is operating a very important piece of the Ethereum layer 1 client. Mm-hmm. When you saw this news, what did you think? How do you think about these 2 things?
Yeah, I think on the funding aspect, it's obviously great that there are kind of non-Ethereum foundation sources of funding for these projects. And obviously this will give any future client teams a story that they can tell to investors for why they should get seed rounds. So it's going to help people in all kinds of second order ways. From a governance capture viewpoint, I guess, I think there's multiple different things that it's important to keep in mind, right? One is that Arbitrum is not kind of, uniquely threatening or kind of, scary or whatever here, right? So, Optimism had been participating in EAP 4844 and put a couple of developers toward it. Consensus has literally funded entire client teams, right? And then the question is well, what's the difference between buying a client team and just incubating a couple of them yourself, right? There's a long history of all kinds of projects. Obviously, the Parity running the Parity clients, and also having the Polkadot network, right? So, this isn't unprecedented, though. At the same time, obviously what Arbitrum did is kind of bigger than what Optimism has done and so forth. But it's not we're entering a scary new unknown or anything, right? But at the same time, it's definitely important for us to be vigilant, right? The sort of dystopia that I have in mind is traditional internet governance, right? If you look at, the DEP3C and so forth, there's a lot of precedent for public goods organizations where their funding model basically is, we get funding by people who are buying governance leverage, and that does fund them, but that also leads to some often not very nice governance outcomes. Right, there have been a bunch of scandals about introducing sort of the equivalent of protocol layer DRM into various internet protocols, and that gets pushed by the large corporations that have seats at some of these organizations. So the the concern here basically is can we avoid that, right? And I'm not sure I have a good answer. I think it's important for us to start thinking about the question. It is important to not be catastrophist about it, right? And also just remember the reality that all of these people who are participating, and even the people signing the checks and buying these things up and funding the client teams, they are well-meaning people, and they are still aligned with the Ethereum ecosystem. But we have seen how divergences of alignment happen over time, and how even the internet itself sort of felt like a crypto-y idealistic happy family in the early 2000s, and then it split into all kinds of things that ended up having often bitterly opposing objectives. And and it's time to kind of start thinking and being vigilant, and at least asking the question of what it means to have a governance process that's robust against these kinds of things.
Sure. And might a positive second order consequence of this be an actual a stronger incentive mechanism for more client diversity? If we have shown to the world that, hey, if you build a client, you might get acquired and have a payday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely, I think. The question is what part of all the client teams and developers get funded in this way, right? Like I think 0 to 20% is an improvement, but like 75 to 95 would I think be a massive threat, right? Yeah, so it's one of those kinds of situations where we want to kind of cheer the first step of the journey, but kind of recognize that we don't want to over rely on this, which is like something that has happened in the internet and that has lots of problems there.
At Rollup Day, which was hosted by Scroll on Monday before Devcon, you talked about how historically almost everything about crypto and software in general is slow to ship. The proof of stake came much later than expected, and I could repeat 7 other examples of the same thing. But then you said that it's been the zk teams, the zk rollup teams that have really astounded the trajectory of development. Why is that the case? Like, what was the magic secret sauce that has really accelerated the zkEVM? Because we saw 2 zkEVM testnets announced by Scroll and Polygon. zkSync announced their layer 3 testnet, and mainnet is like in 15 days or so. How did this happen so quickly? What do you credit the success of all of these teams?
I think there's some things that are slow and there's some things that are fast, right? And like it feels like different types of technology. It's just like naturally have different speeds, right? If you even compare like the rate at which AI has been progressing over the last year versus supersonic flight, where looks like we're gonna have it again, but we're gonna have to wait until close to the end of this decade, right? And like that's obviously a big difference between kind of atoms and bits, but within the world of bits, there's different kinds of bits, and it does feel like once the tools are there and once kind of the basics of zero knowledge stuff get abstracted enough, then the rest of it is just like something that can just like start running pretty quickly, right? So I'd say, pluck up probably has been really important, right? Like 5 years ago, the attitude toward these zkEVMs is probably, we're not going to even try because we just know that the overhead of literally sticking an EVM into a snark is going to be totally infeasible. But, since then, we've had Plunk and we've had Plookup and we've had all of these theoretical improvements. And like that's actually gotten us to the point where like it makes sense for people to start writing the circuits and, the circuits start getting written, right? So that's nice. But then, it is important to be cautious and remember, like, it is very possible that we're going to have zkEVMs with bugs within a year, but getting to zkEVMs without bugs is going to take, another 5 to 10 years. But, still, it's a huge amount of progress, and it's definitely really something that we should all be taking advantage of.
Certainly. At conferences, there's always 2 parts, right? There's the conference during the day, and then there's the fun activities at night. People go off and have dinner, sometimes small dinners, large dinners. Sometimes they go to parties. What does Vitalik do after the conference day is over and the sun goes down?
Generally have been trying to have like fairly quiet dinners and go to sleep fairly early. Yeah, I don't know. I'm realizing like I'm definitely not a fan of the late night stuff, possibly because I'm just like totally out of energy from talking to people that like I don't want to do any more of that. Yeah.
Is it draining to be at a conference where everyone is hounding you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How have you managed this? How have you learned to juggle this?
I mean, realistically, just like try to be aware of when I have the energy for this stuff and when I don't, and like when I don't hide. I don't know. It's probably better to hide than to like just go out anyway and have have some risk of accidentally being mean to someone. So.
Vitalik, yesterday on our account abstraction panel, I asked you to introduce yourself because every single time you introduce yourself in a different era of Ethereum, you have a different way of doing it. Who are you in Ethereum in 2022?
Well, I mean, I guess yesterday I said I'm a fashion influencer and travel blogger. It's, I don't know. What'll I be in 2023? Who knows? Might, circle back to being a white paper author. I don't know. Well, I don't know. There's always more white papers to write,
Vitalik, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate it.
No, thank you too. It's good to be here. Cheers.
Bam.